Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne-pestana, and we're here today with special guest, Ron Baker, who's here to share with us his new book, Bright Lights, Big Empty, A Journey of Profound Awakening. Have you reached all of your goals that you thought would bring you happiness and still feel empty and unfulfilled inside? So Ron Baker is here today to help us turn this around. After walking away from a career in the performing arts to focus on guiding individuals into a surprising new approach to personal transformation, Ron Baker has spent 25 years as a bioenergetics therapist, healer, speaker, and author. He has nurtured thousands into meaningful empowerment through his School of Self-Mastery and inspired millions to come together for his worldwide events that he has led from sacred sites all around the globe. So welcome to the show, Ron Baker.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my goodness, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. I have no doubt that, my goodness, your book's a huge success. I'm not surprised because once I picked it up, I couldn't put it down.
Awesome. I love hearing that. Yeah.
Well, and so let's talk about your title, because I'm sure when people see this, they're like, wait a minute, what does this even mean?
Yeah. Bright Lights, Big Empty. When I was exploring titles, it was like, how do I encompass the scope of what this book covers? And when I was talking about it with the person at the publishers, and we got closer and closer to what would encapsulate my first career in the performing world, which had been such a journey of seeking outer validation, a journey of glamour, a journey of doing the best I knew how in the early part of my life to try and prove myself and prove my worth. And when I was fortunate enough to perform over 60 leading roles all over the world in opera and Broadway, it ended up not being able to give me that inner sense of self-value that I was hoping it would. So I came up empty. So eventually there are other meanings to this title, but initially I thought this is perfect for what people can relate to in their own lives. It doesn't have to be that they're seeking a world career on stage. It can be anything that is the glamour that we think is going to be the thing that proves us, that validates us, that gives us a sense of self. And we hear so many different versions of this story. And the good news is the book talks about the complete healing alternative that I discovered, the journey to a profound sense of self that I eventually learned how to build layer by layer, and the profound opportunity that leading me into a second career, which has been a school of self-mastery, where I've had a chance to teach thousands of people around the world with the process that I've built over 25 years. And so the journey of this book looks at what doesn't work well, and then what works profoundly and reliably well. So there's the title.
Well, such a perfect title for this book. And it's, you've had such a dramatic change. I think a lot of people can really relate to reaching for those high points, like I'm going to be happy, or I'll be worthy, or I'll be successful when I reach X amount point. And you get to this point and it's like, well, I'm supposed to be happy now. So what happened?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it must be me. I don't know.
Yeah, I got a box of cheap accolades. Now what am I going to do?
Yeah. And the good news is achievement is awesome. And no matter what field we're in, it can be amazing, but only if it's an opportunity for us to celebrate and invest self versus that achievement is going to give me a sense of self. And so it's cool to be able to relate to everybody's journey, no matter what their specifics are in this way.
With all the people that you work with, what do you think they really get hung up with the most?
Most people just don't know that there's a true alternative. We have lived in a world that has had so little education about self and the journey of self and what it means to build a sense of self, and don't even understand that that's the grand prize that we're all seeking. And so we're trying to do all this outer focus, trying to get relationships and jobs and money and stuff to do the trick that we've sort of been handed. It's sort of like the fairy tale. And so most people get caught up in, I have no idea what I'm seeking. I just know that what I'm doing doesn't work. And even the people who come to me and say, I have tons of tools. I've done so many workshops. I've gathered all these tools and I don't know what to do with them, to actually have a clear map of the journey, a clear map of self. And so that, not even knowing what I don't know or not even knowing what I'm actually seeking, is where most people get in trouble.
I can easily see that. And I think we've all been there, done that, got the bumper sticker for it, right? So what made, I mean, because I know you went through this and your book describes it so well. You go through your life and your life's journey, and then you get to this pivotal point where everything changes. Can you share a little bit about that with us?
Yes, I had been seeking validation from outside myself after growing up in a household with a father who never said a single thing to me. He was right there. He was having his version of success in life and never spoke up, never engaged in a single conversation. And so that's where the seed of the challenge got set up for me mostly. And so I was trying to figure out, who do I need to be in order to get his validation? And so my journey of seeking that one person became, oh, it's got to be bigger and better and bigger and better. And I got to a world-class level of getting validation from others, but it probably was when I came to New York City to make my debut at Lincoln Center. For those who are not aware of the classical world, it's probably the pinnacle of classical performing in the world. And so I came to make my debut there. And it was a huge success in the newspapers, the reviews, the applause, the cheers. And I was like, uh-oh. It doesn't get any bigger than this in this particular field. And I don't feel any different. I'm still on the inside feeling like that little, sorry, it's actually moving me to say it out loud in this moment for whatever reason, but which is fine. It's harder to talk when the tears are coming. So I still feel like that little boy who is lost and alone. And I guess there's never going to be an achievement that saves me from myself, from my wound. And that wake-up call set me on a different trajectory, looking for deeper answers. And so I sought out teachers from so many different traditions and approaches and started to gather the clues and hints that would allow me to go after a different goal. And they all said, you need to learn how to connect to yourself on the inside. You need to have an inner journey. I didn't even know what an inner journey meant. And it turns out that the more I learned to connect to myself on the inside, the more I was able to bring a sense of self to the opportunities that I had. And all of a sudden, I was able to have meaningful goals within the performing. I was able to have meaningful connections to people where I was more and more authentic and shared. and found out that I was not remotely alone in the journey of confusion, seeking outer validation, etc. And so that wake-up call at Lincoln Center was really the big turning point that set me on a different path.
And we're so glad it did, because this book is just amazing.
Thank
Well,
you.
and I know as you're doing this inner work, I mean, was it really difficult for you to do that connection? And is it something that you still work with today?
It is absolutely what I work with today. It was such a huge transformation that I went through that I ended up canceling my performing career. I had the top agents in the world. I was booked 2 to 3 years in advance, and I stopped doing auditions in order to say, you know what? This has made such a difference to me. And as I start to share it with the people who are in my immediate world, it's making such a difference for them. What could be more important than this? And so I began to train and prepare to become a bioenergetics therapist. Fancy word for saying somebody who understands how to move energy and how to help people clear their blocked energy in order to blossom into more and more of who they are authentically. And so I trained to be able to quantify the journey I had taken, to make it a step-by-step, clear, reliable approach to life. And so as I developed that, and it was having such consistent results with the people, I was like, okay, it's time to let go of the performing career and dedicate myself to this. And I did all kinds of different training as a healer and all kinds of discoveries of how to get to deeper and deeper depths of this inner self. And that changed the trajectory of my life. And yet the foundation of what I learned at the beginning has only been built upon, and it is still absolutely what I use to pass on to others. And fortunately now it's been thousands of people around the world.
How did you find the courage to be able to make that transition? Because I think a lot of people would look at that going, gosh, okay, a very successful career. You've had over 60 leading roles on Broadway, to now I'm following this more spiritual path. How did you find that courage?
Well, I think that when something is clearly so meaningful, we become more willing to face the fears that are involved in allowing change. And if we can each identify some of the things that truly matter to us, if we're really, really honest, it gives us a more natural courage rather than just letting go of something. I didn't really focus on what I was letting go of. I focused on what I was moving toward. And that motivated me day after day, and it just kept getting better and better. And I began to identify more things that mattered to me. And this is the approach, certainly, that I inspire at the beginning of a process with someone, that somehow awakens a natural courage that we all have, because we have a natural desire to feel fulfilled, to feel authentic. And so the courage really is to be honest and authentic with self, and then identifying some of the vision that we can move toward doesn't always equal needing to let go of a career, but it does equal prioritizing things that make it worth waking up every day, that make us really happy to show up every day, even when we have challenges, because challenges are just a natural part of, oh, this is what I don't know yet. This is what I need to learn how to navigate. And if I just get some support and some clear tools or approaches, and I have a clear map, it becomes, I love my life. I don't hear that statement from tons of people until they start doing a process like this. And then all of a sudden, there's a different aliveness, a different passion, because I'm investing in me. I'm investing in my most authentic priorities. What could be better than that? And all of a sudden, instead of looking outside the self like I did initially, where I was working my butt off to try and get people to see me a certain way, that's not motivational. That is fear. And it's draining. It was exhausting to do all of that. And all of a sudden, when I was using the same amount of energy to invest in myself, and it built more and more joy, willingness, authenticity, etc., then it was so worth the investment that it becomes courage and motivation feeding itself. And it just takes on a life of its own.
Well, thank you for going through that. I really appreciate you sharing that because I think a lot of people just, the unknown is so scary, and
Mm.
so if we're looking at a new process or a new way of doing things, I think for a lot of people that could be really difficult.
Yeah, I think the reason the unknown seems so scary to people is because we got so little education about life and how it works when we were growing up. All the people I've taught, that has been the case, so I kind of claim it as a general likelihood. And so we got so little clarity and education about self, about the journey, about how to make it meaningful. And so we clamor on to whatever initial hits of gratification or reassurance that we can, such as the difference between having a father who never said anything to me and all of a sudden when I showed that I had certain talents, I started getting attention. And that's when I felt seen to some degree. And so I clamored on to that hit of gratification and it became the only thing I knew. And so to let that go would have been way too overwhelming because who will I be? What will I have left? I'll just be lost and empty and purposeless. I find that most people cling to their initial protection racket and comfort zone based on that fear. No one's ever made it clear to me. I don't understand how life works. And I adore being able to offer people a much clearer map to self and how life actually dances with us. And when people feel that clarity, the blossoming becomes much more effortless and willing and passionate.
I learned so much from your book, and one of the many takeaways that has stuck with me is that we learn so much from our parents. And in many respects, the viewpoints, all of that is generational. This would give us a very limited view of the world around us.
Yes, well, the great news is that when we understand what has been missing, we don't actually need to move into whose fault is it, but we live in a world that looks for that. And so it's like, wait a minute. If somebody asked me to teach them how to build a jet engine, I would be clueless. I can't help you. I don't know what to say. And this is basically how people have felt for generation after generation, doing their best to say, okay, I'm going to teach you the foundation of how to get a job, make money, and put a roof over your head. As if that is supposed to be the end of the picture and fulfillment. And it's just not. It is an important foundation in the physical world, but until we learn that self is the centerpiece of our lives and investing in a sense of self, a joy of self, a passion that comes from within self to say, no matter what structures I have in my life, I need to create this meaningful intimacy with the people, the opportunities. I need to show up and decide what experiences I want to have and give those to myself. This is all missing in most of our histories. So as an example, I've never taught a single person who grew up where, just like we were taught to identify, this is your nose, and this is your ear, and this is your chin, and we learned to identify certain things, well, that's about as far as we got with self. No one that I've ever taught has been told, wow, I see that you're feeling sad. Oh, that's what that feeling is. Yes, and you're totally safe to feel sad. I'm here. You're not alone. Feel the feeling. It's there for a reason. It's not bad, wrong, or scary. It's just a feeling. And they name feeling after feeling. I see that you're feeling excited. I see that you're feeling curious, etc. We could name hundreds of feelings, but we got so little encouragement how to land in our experience of self and life around us based on whatever's happening, that we don't feel safe with feelings. We don't feel safe to share feelings. If I haven't even identified what I feel, I can't really share it with you. Well, feelings are what give each moment meaning. By being willing to experience whatever we're in, it becomes truly meaningful in some way. Whereas I teach tons of people and they go, I don't even really remember my childhood. And that is, I explain to them, because no one taught us to land in each moment and to know what we were feeling. When we land in the experience, then the moment becomes very conscious and owned, and we can remember that moment. Most people can remember some really heightened moments where they got a particular toy they wanted, or on the other end of the spectrum, when something particularly traumatizing happened. We can remember those moments because we couldn't escape whatever feelings were going on. But if we can learn to land in the experience, each moment, each day can become more meaningful rather than I'm on the hamster wheel of life. I'm going through the motions. I'm working my butt off. I'm busy as can be. I never have any downtime. And where did our life go? We're on a hamster wheel of doing and outer focus rather than moment after moment after moment of experiences that we've chosen to allow, to invest in, and it creates this beautiful intimacy with a life that we love. And this, of course, this is just one layer, but it is a crucial layer that has been missing, because if mommy and daddy were never taught how, they can't bring it to us and teach us how. And so in these last, I'm going to give it probably 20 years or so, more and more people are waking up, and there are reasons for that, but that's a whole other focus. And people are starting to seek more fulfilling approaches. And that's why I'm so glad that I have this School of Self-Mastery and that I'm putting out my book, which is literally me moving through the clear map from survival consciousness into more and more and more fulfillment. So there's a few more layers.
So when we look about landing in a layer, what does that look like for us?
Well, if we have clear guidance from a teacher, a model who has gone through something, then we are taught what that person has learned works well, doesn't work well. And so basically, we need to learn how to shift some of our focus from all that outer doing and busyness back to self. Let me give one very specific, clear example that everyone listening right now can actually do for themselves. First, We need to be connected to self. But if no one taught us or no one modeled it, then we're not very connected to self. Let me give you a litmus test for yourself. I'm going to say a word, and when I say that word, I'd love for you to consider bringing your focus to it, but don't change a single thing about what you're already doing. The word is breath. Don't change, just notice how you are habitually breathing. I have done this with thousands of people from so many different cultures and countries. Almost without exception, people discover that they're doing this very shallow breath into the upper chest. Some people get to the middle of the chest. However, this is the most peripheral connection that we can create and still survive. I call it survival breathing. So when you look for a contrast, all we have to do is look to a baby lying in a crib on its back, sleeping. The only thing that moves when a baby breathes is the stomach. It rises up and down as the baby naturally does a full body breath, naturally connected, at least in potential. And so as we move through life in those early years, and we end up with experiences like my father, who never said a single thing to me, we learn to contract and hide and try to figure out, and we go more and more up into our heads, trying to work it out as a little child who doesn't really have a ton of capacity, but we become, without knowing it, less and less connected like we were as an infant. And we don't want to do the wrong thing, and we don't want to make mistakes, and we don't want to upset anyone or create conflict, or so many different motivations. And so the breath gets higher and higher, or shallower and shallower. And then we go and hang up in our heads, most people for the rest of their lives, just trying to reiterate whatever I have figured out must be my only set of options. I have to pretend. I have to try and impress. I have to not speak up. I have to do all these things that aren't about connecting to self, nurturing self, championing self. And so this litmus test of doing shallow breathing is one of the first signs that I'm not connected to me. So when you say, what does landing in a layer look like? I say, let's start there. It is the foundation of you connecting to self that's going to be built on. And so now, why don't we try and do a breath like the baby? So if everyone's willing, put your hand on your lower belly, below your belly button, and when you breathe in the nose, see if you can begin to fill up like a balloon in that lower body. A lot of people have lost that coordination and can't naturally just jump right back into it, but to the best of your ability today, take that in-breath and fill up that lower belly. And now breathe out the mouth. I'm not going to do it. You do it. I can almost guarantee that if breathing out the mouth occurs, it is through the tiniest little opening, almost like a straw. Most people make it go because they're not used to breathing out of their mouth. So what I suggest is that is survival breathing. Careful, following instruction, but very careful. And so we do this shallow in-breath and this tiny little out-breath. What we haven't been taught is every breath we take is a clear message to self. How much do I deserve to receive with the in-breath? How safe am I to receive with the in-breath? And then the out-breath equals, how safe am I to assert or share who I am from the inside, releasing to the outside. It also reveals how safe I feel to let go of controlling everything. So if I'm doing this little, you can see how careful that is. So now imagine full receiving. Now tune in and see that I'm not threatened in any way by that huge out-breath I just did. So if you're willing, as you listen to this, breathe with me a couple of times with a very open, full out-breath. Together we breathe. And one more. That is an introduction to landing experientially in one layer, one introduction of reconnection to self. And when we begin to move that energy, which is way more powerful than initially meets the eye, it creates more flow, more energy, more vitality, awakens us out of our heads into the body more fully, and even creates proactive health. I love being able to use examples that are practical and proved. As an example, by moving energy in this way and in other ways, I have been able to only deal with sickness 2 days in 25 years. That is one of the benefits of flow and connection to self. So there's one layer.
Does it take long for people to work through one layer? Is it just like what we went through, or is it something that's more detailed?
Well, to practice something into becoming second nature takes time. But we learned our survival approach over time. To begin to invest, you begin to see immediate shifts. So as an example, people who breathe like I just did initially will feel dizziness in their head quite often because they're moving so much more energy than they're used to. And then I teach them how to ground that energy and to no longer feel dizzy and to more and more open and access to self. As we do, we can introduce what I call adult reality. We can introduce how much safer we are than we imagined. That's why I took the time to say, I'm not threatened in any way by breathing in this full way. We learn layer by layer, day after day of our lives, a new approach, a new sense of safety, a new depth of truth about life. So as an example, I don't have to prove myself every day. I don't have to work really hard instead to gather someone's validation. Instead, I can make these new choices, which gets better and better and better, reliably, building percentages of trust in the new experience. And so the shift is immediate, but it deepens over time. Eventually, we add, let me learn what I've been doing, how I've been defending, how I've been holding on, what has been keeping me from feeling safe to be truly authentic, to go after the things that matter to me. What did I learn early on? And now, as an adult, do I still see life that way? So as an example, do I still see that my father didn't speak up to me because I had no worth and value? No. I learned by looking more deeply from my adult self that my father simply didn't know how. His father died when he was young. He had no modeling. He didn't know what to do to create connection or intimacy. He didn't know what to say. He was scared to death of actual conversation, but he was great at his job, and so that's where he put all of his focus. So it was incredibly helpful for me to eventually realize by looking back at my life that much of what I have embraced as the way it is was not the way it is. It was my child's limited capacity to understand, and I personalized it all. And so now I teach people how to view life from a much deeper truth, how to get in touch with adult truths. And when you merely ask some of these practical questions, it helps people to claim a different context and approach. Let me give a quick example. Somebody says, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I've gained 5 pounds." And I go, "Okay. Are you in major judgment and fear?" "Oh my gosh, yes, I have to be this particular ideal weight." And I go, "Okay, let's explore that from adult reality for a minute. I'd like you to name 3 to 5 people you admire, people you really appreciate in your life." And they name them in their heads. And I go, "Okay, if that person gained 5 pounds, would you tell them to take a hike and not come back until they got back to a certain weight?" "No, I would never do that." "Oh, so you're telling me this only applies to what your child decided was necessary in order to make you lovable. Do you think any of those people would tell you to take a hike because you gained 5 pounds? Chances are there's some real compassionate adult truth just waiting for you to consider." That's one example of countless examples we can look at that help us to make a transition from the habitual wounded child decisions that tend to run people's lives, which I point out a ton in the book from my own journey. These are the things I learned. These are the limitations I embraced. And let me explain to you how I learned to open to much deeper truths that allowed me to then treat myself with much more compassion and respect. And by illustrating from my own life what allows for this greater freedom and compassion that we've been seeking the whole time, and that we can give it to ourselves once we have a clear map, it becomes much less daunting to consider the journey of layer by layer, making enhancements, transformations, deeper, courageous choices. It's simple, it's nurturing, and in 25 years of doing this, not one single person has ever said to me, "I don't feel safe with what we're doing." The adult has felt safe, teaching the inner child how to feel safe. So there's a few perspectives about your question.
I know I kind of put you on the hot seat there, didn't I?
No problem. No, I live on the hot seat.
Well, and so I know a lot of people were like, well, I could find self compassion for everybody else, but, finding that for themselves, that's got to be really tough.
Yeah, people think it is because we've lived in the myths that we decided, like me deciding that I had no worth and value simply because my father didn't know how. And so once you make the decision that you have no worth and value, then you protect it, and people don't know how to have access to you. So it seems like it's reiterating the fact that I don't have value because people aren't creating meaningful connections to me somehow, not understanding I'm the one blocking it. I'm the one protecting because I live with this myth about myself. And it's literally hell on wheels. And so instead of looking at all, I'm just going to go back to working my butt off with this outer hamster wheel of busyness and achieving and whatever, or caretaking or whatever someone's favorite approach has been.
So, you talk about getting to this point where we're really authentic. And I know that's a term that gets thrown around quite a bit.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean?
Authenticity is, first of all, an intention. I want to be real. Like, for instance, myself, I always wanted to be authentic. When people read the book, they will see this as a through line. I just didn't know how to get in touch with myself. And so my most authentic self was the one who was working his butt off to achieve and to impress. That was authentic as a piece of myself, but most of myself was buried inside. I'd never accessed it. I didn't know what the authenticity would look like. So it starts with an intention to be as authentic as I can be. And then let me look and see what's working well in my life and what's not working so well. I don't have to have all the answers, but let me at least evaluate. And I can authentically or honestly answer the questions to the best of my ability today. Let me give an example of how I did my best but didn't know how. When I was in grad school, we did an exercise where we were sitting in a circle and the teacher did something I don't consider very responsible, but it equaled, I'd like you to go around the circle and tell each person one thing that you think they would be wise to look at or transition or work on. Now, oh my God, was that not responsible in a class that had nothing to do with that? However, when we went around the room, people did speak up to some degree, but when it came to me, I didn't get hardly any feedback at all about things I needed to work on. And the teacher said to me at the end, "Wow, it was really amazing to see that, Ron." And I said, "Yes, I'm not sure that I have any insecurities." Oh my goodness. I was so buried and into my mask of presenting the best parts of me that I could. I had buried any part of me that was insecure. And there was tons inside me that I was not aware of when I was 22 years old. And so I was being as authentic as I knew how to be. So it's confusing if you say to someone, "I'm going to teach you how to be authentic," and they go, I think I'm already being authentic. Informed authenticity, where you get to know more and more of yourself, where the parts that we have buried or tried to avoid at all costs, find out those parts can be safe too. I can be safe to admit I'm a validation junkie. I'm so afraid that who I really am is not lovable. I'm so afraid I don't know how to have meaningful connections and conversation. I'm so afraid that this part or that part. I'm so afraid if I gain 5 pounds. I'm so afraid of so many things. Well, when we can be the next level authentic, we can admit some of those challenges and feel safe to share them, at least with a starting place person, whether it's a really good friend or whether it's a therapist like myself, that we can learn to admit, but that doesn't mean we're going to be trapped in the limitation. If we seek the tools and the approaches that are nurturing and compassionate, we can find out that none of those wounds and challenges are actually threatening at all. That we can learn to see them, like I've already explained in a couple of my examples, from wiser places. And now, what did I actually need? I needed my father and my mother to see me, to acknowledge me, to teach me how to connect to myself, to nurture me through learning curves, to teach me it was safe to make mistakes and build on what I learned from those mistakes, just as some random examples. And so once we get more authentic with more parts of self, we can learn how to approach and nurture each of those things, offering our inner self exactly what was missing growing up. I actually say there's perfection in all of this, and I call it a certain term. I say this is our soul curriculum for this lifetime. To set up certain challenges and then to go on a journey seeking the solutions and the deeper truths so that we can show up and nurture ourselves through those challenges. And as we do, we become more and more and more authentic. And then we begin to awaken the courage to say, you know what? I would really love to do this or to go there or to try this other thing. And I've never felt safe enough to admit it. But now that I'm finding out these deeper truths, that I'm not unworthy and unlovable, I was just caught up in my soul curriculum challenges. And now I feel freer to admit it, to work toward it, to invest in it. And this is how we claim more and more authenticity.
Because I think a lot of people just get we hear about being authentic all the time, and it could be kind of a word that's thrown out there. And you're right. A lot of people go, I'm already authentic. What do you mean?
Yeah. What's the problem? I guess I'm there. Yeah.
I'm all good.
Yeah. And people do get stuck there and afraid that anything else would be that, again, mystery word, the unknown. Well, no example I've shared was known to me initially, but oh my gosh, was I enhanced by finding out and looking deeper because I looked with compassion. That is something I emphasize in a huge way in the journey that I outline in Bright Lights, Big Empty.
So there's a question I've been wanting to ask you.
Yeah.
I know that you do channeling. When
Yes.
did that become part of your story?
So lots of people hear the word channeling now, and so it's familiar to a lot of people, but I assure you, when the subject came up in 1990, it was not a common term. It was not a common experience. And fortunately for me, the first time I experienced channeling, I was not the one connecting to one of my guides. So just like I've said at the beginning, we have such little education about self and about life and how life wants to dance with us and how it all works. But we have so much more potential than most people have ever even taught to consider. We are so much more connected to life, even on a spiritual level. And when you say spiritual, in 1990 for sure, that meant religious, and therefore a particular approach with certain limits. But when I say spiritual, I say we are all soul selves. We have a child, an adult, and a soul component of self. And very few people have even talked about the soul and what that means and how it's practically involved in our lives. Like I suggested, setting up certain challenges early on and then encouraging us toward seeking the solutions in adulthood. So we have tons of spiritual connection to life and to one another. So for instance, it can be as simple as the intuition of, oh, Sally just popped in my head and I haven't thought of Sally in years. And all of a sudden the phone rings and it's Sally. And that was her energy and intention reaching out toward us because she found our number and she's going to call. And we receive that impulse as intuition. That is a spiritual connection. Now, we are so far in our lives mostly caught up in the more basic levels of our potential. Imagine that we all have spiritual guides, but even just our soul self would suffice for this example. We all have higher energies that seek to encourage us toward more fulfilling choices, awakening into our authentic hearts, getting out of our heads, reconnecting, and evolving into those connections. So all of that to say, my dear friend Robert, who is introduced throughout the book, he eventually became my business partner for 22 years before passing away. He awakened into a connection to a guide that turned out to be Archangel Gabriel. And this energy came through and said some of the most loving, practical, wise things I had ever heard, even in the first meeting. So I introduce at the beginning of the book, shortly after my wake-up call at Lincoln Center, I met Robert, and 3 months later, he channeled for the first time. So let me take you on this journey of when I woke up and said, I need a new path because this direction is never going to lead me to true fulfillment or a sense of self-value. 3 months later, the timing was perfect. I consider that soul order or divine order. So it was perfect that Robert brought through this teacher who then spent the next 30 years, 22 with Robert and eventually through me as well, passing on layer after layer after layer of the most profoundly beautiful, reliable, practical approaches to life, how to resolve the wounding, how to understand what's going on the planet, how to know why things are accelerating in unprecedented ways on the planet, and how to resolve every single challenge. Because once we understand the map of self, the map of life evolving into more potential, we can get aligned with that journey. We can learn to approach life in ways that are compassionate, safe, powerful, and meaningful. And this journey with Gabriel literally became the most profound opportunity I could possibly try and convey. And I love that it doesn't matter that it came from a spiritual guide. It just matters that the information is so dang helpful and clear. And as we learn to apply each layer of that information into our lives, that became the main foundation of the approach that I suggested at the beginning, transformed my life in ways that continue to evolve, continue to improve and enhance. And so the experience of opening up to connection, to other people or to our spiritual guides is part of the benefit that we can all learn to do to varying degrees. And I'm so grateful that Robert modeled it. And then a few years later, I discovered I had my own version of doing and hearing, and have continued to receive these beautiful messages that not only enhance my life, but I've been able to offer to so many more people around the world.
Well, I'm sure we could talk forever, Ron. I so appreciate just the work that you bring, the light you bring to the world. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work?
The simplest way is to go to my website, which is ronbaker.net. From there, you can find podcasts and courses and ways to reach me directly, and so many videos and layers of teaching are there. And so that is the main hub I would suggest, ronbaker.net.
Well, Ron, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you so much for having me. The opportunity to reach people with seeds of encouragement in a time that is wacky in the world, oh my goodness, means more than I can say.
Well, thank you, Ron. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Bright Lights, Big Empty, A Journey of Profound Awakening. Again, if you'd like to connect with Ron, you can at his website, ronbaker.net. For more information, be part of his community, sign up for his newsletter, and make sure to check out his events. Well, we're going to pause here for a quick moment. We'll be right back after these messages. I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.